Hi, I'm Amy Sparks, an Associate Director in our Financial Advisory Services team here at Deloitte Auckland, New Zealand. And I'm joined by my colleagues, Andrew Boyven, Head of Climate for Deloitte New Zealand, and Lara McKittrick, a Director in our Technology Strategy and Transformation team. We're here to talk to you about three things, and that's software solutions, decarbonisation, and our new Deloitte Greenlight offering, which we're launching in New Zealand today. We titled this session, How to Select the Right Software Solution to Enable Decarbonisation Within Your Organisation. And we hope that our conversation sheds light into exactly that and why selecting the right software is so important. Before we get into our conversation, I'd just like to quickly set the scene. We know that climate change and the response to climate change is accelerating. We see societies and governments responding quickly. Whenever I like to talk about climate change and the response to it, I quite like to look at the numbers. And you can look at numbers from different geographies or different sectors. One quite compelling figure on investment into climate technology. And the latest report, a Net Zero Insights report from 2022, shows that investment into the sector was $82 billion in 2022, which is up from 21% in 2021. And that's looking to increase as we look forward as well. PitchBook estimates that by 2028, the market value of the sector will be $1.4 trillion. The fastest growing subsector of climate technology, PitchBook estimates, will be software solutions and fintech, and we're going to unpack software solutions today. So before we sort of unpack software, I thought it would be nice to sort of look at the barriers that organisations are facing when it comes to decarbonisation. When we talk about software, we call them software solutions, which implies that they have to solve for something. So Andrew, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the barriers that organisations face when it comes to decarbonisation.
Thanks, Amy. And the barriers to decarbonisation are significant. The climate change movement has been around for literally decades. So everybody knows that this is an issue. They know that they should be doing the right thing, in inverted commas, and decarbonising. But to date, the action clearly hasn't been enough. So there must be barriers there. Our government's helped us reduce some of those barriers in terms of mandating and putting things into legislation. For instance, the Zero Carbon Act came in 2019, but even that's now, 3-4 years ago. There's another helpful piece of legislation and a new standard from a climate-related disclosure perspective that's coming in for our largest listed entities, those that are above $60 million in terms of market capitalization, and also our financial institutions that have assets of more than $1 billion. So they are organizations and the government are forcing people to look at this in terms of that decarbonisation question, because there's clearly risk there for us as a country, really. So why have we not done anything to date? Well, number one, it's actually really hard from a data perspective. That's probably the most difficult thing. Now, again, my background is in financial reporting. Financial reporting has been around for, again, decades and decades. Everybody at the end of the day, if you're looking at a set of financial statements, understands that if it says that there's a dollar in a balance sheet or in an income statement, you can trace that through to a bank account somewhere. And certainly hope that's the case anyway. Whereas with emissions, it's pervasive. Emissions and the emissions data, there's things, even the terminology is difficult to understand. There's things like scope 1, 2, and 3. What does that even mean? Is the emissions that I'm creating via our fleet of vehicles, is that my emissions, but also someone is probably paying me to help from a logistics perspective, so it's also relevant to them, those emissions. And you can't trace back easily to something like a bank account. And then why is that then a barrier? Well, if you don't have the data and you can't measure it, how do you manage it? It's impossible to do that. So you need to be able to measure it so that we can manage it. And then add on, as I've already said, the understanding piece. So those three elements really make it very difficult and very complex in terms of trying to understand the problem that we have so that we then can have action. Because that next step in terms of the decarbonisation is actually acting. And that's where a lot of entities seem to be at the moment. They might be measuring, but then how do we actually act?
Yeah, and that speaks to the next question I had, which was around what are New Zealand firms actually doing to decarbonise at the moment? Are they, very early on in the journey in terms of setting targets, or are we seeing out there in the market some action against those targets as well?
Well, I think there's a real breadth out there. We undertake surveys with our CFOs, both from a New Zealand context and a global, because we do need to remember that this is a global issue. There is no kind of boundary here. It's a problem for everybody. From a New Zealand perspective, there's a real breadth. Some people have been looking at these things for years and years. And starting to come up with answers. Energy companies in particular, obviously, are very aware of this. We've got good renewable energy sources, which is great. People are looking to electrify things. Again, that's good from an emissions perspective. But there's also some people that are literally scratching their heads saying, where do we start? Where do we start? What are we doing? How do we measure those emissions? Again, going back to that first point that I made, how do we solve that problem so that we can then manage it? And when you get onto it in terms of solutions, the solutions historically haven't been there, which also makes it harder.
Yeah, and so I think that's explained really well, Andrew, in terms of like the sort of almost entry-level issue around the data, and just as a baseline you actually have to measure and gather that data, right? Which brings me into thinking around those software solutions that are coming to market to help with that exact problem. And Lara, I wonder from your background in tech, if you could sort of talk to what the right software solution has to do.
Like any software that we select for an organisation, I mean, it ultimately comes down to the outcomes, what the business is trying to achieve. What are the decisions that business is going to want to make off the back of that? What are they trying to solve for? So selecting a piece of tech within this space is no different to anywhere else within the organisation.
Laura, you're bang on in terms of that technology solutions enabling decisions and enabling that output piece, because again, for years and years, as I said earlier, this has been around for years. There have been technology solutions out there. They're essentially databases. They sit there, you collect your carbon data, your emissions data, and that's all good for reporting on your carbon reporting. It's all good from understanding for your sustainability person or your climate person. But for the operations of the teams or the finance team, when they're trying to make a decision in terms of return on investment, it just hasn't enabled that. However, the great thing now, again, with all the mandates and with the general social snowball effect, I suppose, of everybody needing to do this, all the technology players are really coming to the party here, and your big players, you've got niche players, all trying to help entities solve how do I do something about this. So an example is nearly every entity will do forecasting. They'll do that from a financial perspective, but now we're looking out and going, well, what's our scenarios from a climate perspective? What do we need to change in terms of reducing our emissions? And there are tools and software solutions out there now that are dynamic, interactive, where you can go, well, if I want to reduce my carbon by X% or this amount, what is my impact then on my balance sheet or my bottom line? So it's really good to see that those solutions are coming out and really growing.
Yeah. And I'm quite interested in the reverse of that question as well, Lara. So what, and potentially Andrew, welcome to answer as well, what can go wrong, or what does the wrong software selection mean to an organisation?
And look, we see it time and time again, and not just in this space, right? I mean, ultimately, if you select the wrong solution, you are not going to get the outcomes. So, you know, when we're talking around decarbonisation, some of the emission reduction, etc., you're not going to be able to deliver those outcomes that you're wanting to achieve. So yes, you will have the data, but it's not going to inform you to be able to make the right decisions. And then sort of over and above that as well, there is risk when you're looking to bring new software solutions into the organisation. If you haven't connected in with the broader business, you know, you can create inefficiencies. You know, if it is a piece of software that is sitting in isolation, that is not connected into your broader ecosystem, if the data is not managed in the right way, you can have these sort of unintended consequences, or this kind of flow-on impact to your business because you haven't selected that right solution.
Yeah, and just to come in there, I think that solution that is integrated and also, and it is about change management as well. You don't want to create these inefficiencies in the organisation that people then kind of throw up their hands and go, well, why? This is another thing to add to my job. Why am I even doing this? And they're not seeing the value in it. So being integrated is key. I think the other one for me, Amy, is being future focused.
Yes.
So at the moment, everybody's very focused on emissions, carbon. Well, from a wider environment perspective, the next cab off the rank is nature and biodiversity, which is, again, really critical for New Zealand. So picking a software solution that you know will be able to grow.
So Andrew, picking up on, I think, 2 points that you've made that I think are really critical to emphasise. The first being that you mentioned in a previous point that there are a lot of solutions out there. There are a lot of software providers, there are a lot of software solutions. I think we looked at the New Zealand market about a year ago to see what was in our market, and I can't remember the exact figure, but it was definitely more than 30 software solutions related to emissions or carbon data management, right from basic carbon calculators through to all the big names we know and the solutions that they're offering. You also made an important point on the need for software solutions and the providers to remain future focused, and organisations too when they select the solutions and providers. And that's really interesting to me because, you know, when organisations select software, they're normally, what we've been seeing, and sort of keen on your reflection, Andrew, is really heavily focused on that emissions piece. But as you've mentioned, there's a lot of other environmental considerations and climate-related considerations to take into account. So given that, you know, lots of solutions out there, changing environment, changing needs from organisations too, you could add, how have organisations been selecting software to date?
Lara might jump in here from a broader technology solution selection side of things, but from what we've been seeing, it has been, I suppose, more that data collection side, also compliance focused, rather than really thinking about the strategy of the business. And again, as we said earlier, how do we actually shift the dial on things? How do we put this into action? How does it go into our strategy? It has been more compliance focused, or I want to know my emissions. And to an extent, that was absolutely what was needed. But with the new legislation, with the fact that climate-related disclosures require scenario analysis, and with the fact you've got more things coming at entities in terms of nature, in terms of modern slavery, all of those type of things, people and entities are starting to think, I suppose, in a maybe not a more traditional, well, more from a, I think anyway, again, Lara can comment on this, but are taking a broader view. They're not just saying it's a compliance tool or an emissions reporting tool that sits on the side. They're looking at it and now going, what's the best thing? So there are still some people out there that will just go, okay, does it do the emissions reporting job? Does it tick my compliance box? Is it as cheap as possible? Yes. But a lot more organizations are saying, what's the best thing for me? And bringing in the software people, their sustainability people, their finance team, their IT team.
Yeah.
Or I don't know whether you'd add anything.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have seen sort of traditionally it has been the climate and sustainability team that go out and do some research. They get some vendor demos. They see one that they like and then they select it and off they go. And obviously the CFO is involved in that because there's an investment element to that. But really, when organisations are looking at these software solutions, they should be treating it like any other software or bit of technology that they are looking to invest in. It's no different to a new HR system, for example. The HR team doesn't sit in isolation and operate in a silo and make decisions around what the business needs. So we are really encouraging those climate and sustainability teams or those people that are championing this within their organisations to ensure that they do connect in with their business, to not just understand the kind of the here and now and what needs to be done, but so they can remain and sort of stay connected to the broader business strategy. And just like on that point around the here and now as well, ensuring that they stay connected to ensure that whatever the technology that is selected is future-proofed. It's got whatever, it's going to remain relevant for future as this evolves, because we know that things in this space are evolving rapidly. There are a lot of changes that are coming. Andrew, you talked around, like what's next, and around the biodiversity and things like that. So ensuring that they are selecting software that is able to keep up. And you can't expect your climate and sustainability team to be experts in that space, right? Like that's why you've got your technologists, you've got your strategists as well to help shape what those business outcomes need to be. And then when you go through that selection process, you're actually getting a solution that's not just fit for purpose now, future-proofed, and driving the right outcomes for your organisation.
Yeah, for sure. And so that brings us, I guess, to the end of our conversation on sort of software and decarb and selecting the right software solutions. Sort of the next piece for us to talk about really is the Deloitte solution that we've developed globally and that we're really excited to launch into New Zealand as part of Tech Week and on Tech Week TV here. And that's called Greenlight. So the best way to explain Greenlight is really in 3 key points. So yes, there's a software solution that enables end-to-end decarbonisation within organisations. We wrap around our professional advisors at Deloitte, so from financial advisory experts, climate and sustainability experts, and digital and technology experts. And then also we're fully connected into our Deloitte Global Network as well, so we're able to bring the best of Deloitte to Greenlight and to New Zealand market. Lara and Andrew, I wonder if there's any reflections from you on Greenlight and what makes it so different and so exciting.
I guess the things that I'm most excited about with Greenlight is firstly that it is modular in nature. So we know there are a number of companies out there who will already have some of the building blocks in place where they are tracking, measuring data, etc. And so what Greenlight does is it can actually integrate into those solutions, which is great. This is not about ripping out what organisations already have. We can actually work alongside and kind of plug in what makes sense depending on what the organisation's needs are. The other big one for me is the fact that you do have the professional services that we can wrap around organisation as well, depending on the capability that exists within that organisation. So if they need more of the support in the tech space, then we've got our experts in that space. If we've got people more connected into sort of some of the regulatory changes or what's happening as well, because we sort of cover the breadth. So what that means for New Zealand organisations is that they are able to tap into that. So when they are going through this process of ensuring that Greenlight is the right solution for them. It's not just sort of through a singular lens or focus. We really truly are able to wrap that broader support around them to make sure it is the right decision and it's going to drive those right outcomes for their organisation.
And Amy, I think Laura's nailed it there. Haven't really got too much to add. The software solutions and the modular nature means that it's really flexible for entities in New Zealand, and that the expertise that we can wrap around it really will enable action, which I think is the key thing.
Yeah, and that's essentially that's what we're excited about, right? Is that enabling action and moving on these decarbonisation plans and strategies. Yeah. And that brings us to the end of our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to Lara and Andrew for joining this conversation with me as well. We hope you're enjoying Tech Week. It's been a pleasure to be part of Tech Week TV. If you'd like to hear more about Deloitte's Greenlight solution or any of our solutions, please reach out.